Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
All right. So first, just so you understand how QuickBooks handled convenience fees, QuickBooks has never been designed to actually house that information internally in QuickBooks. So there isn't like an automatic place you go and set up a convenience fee and it always applies it to the payment. Now, that may be something they do through Intuit Merchant Services, but it's not inherent in the actual program itself. Now, in QuickBooks Desktop, there is a way to manage it. It's done by creating a subtotal item, which would then subtotal the products that are put into an invoice or a sales receipt. And then there's the processing fee. Now, it's generally set to an other charge, but you could indicate a different option, but generally other charge is the best option for this particular thing. The merchant could name it whatever they want, processing fees, convenience fee, non-cash adjustment, whatever it is that they want it, whatever they want it to be represented as. Then they would indicate what the percentage is, or if it's a flat amount. They would indicate whether this fee, I'm a little confused myself about whether or not taxes are applied to convenience fees or not, because some resellers say they are and some don't. So it's up to the merchant and perhaps their processor as to whether or not they make it taxable or not. My understanding is that it's non-taxable, so I would set it as a non-taxable item. And then they would assign it to a particular chart of accounts. This is just a form of indicating where that money is going to be allocated in QuickBooks. So of course, the merchant's going to want to talk to their accountant or whoever manages their QuickBooks to make sure that they set these things up so that it will ultimately give them the best reporting from QuickBooks. Okay. Do you have any questions about that? Does that seem pretty
Seems
straightforward?
pretty simple. So the way I understand it, they're able to add the convenience fee on their QuickBooks itself.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Into the invoice itself. So one of the things you want to
And
remember is
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ketra. Which page were you on just now when you were showing us where they can add it? Which one of them?
it's called the item list, and this is
Item
where
list. Okay.
QuickBooks, yeah, this would be like any kind of inventory, whether it be services, inventory products,
Okay.
additional fees, discounts, anything like that would be managed through the item list. So merchants can go in and add discounts and that kind of stuff, but it's
Okay.
all built into the invoice itself. So before I continue, the one key factor you need to remember about the plugin, which is the product we offer that integrates with QuickBooks Online, is that all it simply does is tell QuickBooks a payment occurred. It does not tell QuickBooks how to allocate that money. It does not update QuickBooks that a convenience fee was applied. It simply says, QuickBooks, I ran this amount and here's the total. And there's two ways that the plugin puts payment information into the QuickBooks, and we'll get to that in a moment. Um, but that's the most important thing to remember about the plugin is it just simply tells QuickBooks if there was a payment for a particular customer for a particular invoice if provided.
Okay.
So as a customer, I'd come in here and I would build my order just like I would for anyone else, selecting my products, putting them into the system, into the invoice. Now, QuickBooks is also automatically allocating, it's telling us what the rate is for that product, how much it is based off the quantity, and then whether it's a taxable or non-taxable product. Now, after I've put in all the regular products, I would come down and add the subtotal, which then gives me a total on the products that are being purchased. And since that is where the question about whether or not the processing fees are taxable or not, but in order for us to get a processing fee, it's going to be based off that subtotal. So now, if I put in taxes, if I make it taxable, it does change the rates down here. So it depends on how the merchant wants to handle that or how the processor will allow it. That's up to them. But QuickBooks
Okay.
allows you to set it up either way. Now, in my understanding from my research, they're non-taxable. Processing fees are a non-taxable item. So But if the merchant provider says, hey, we do that, that's okay, then the merchant can set it up either way. But what we're doing is we're just saying these are the products that are being purchased. It is based off of the total of that. So the convenience fee would be this amount minus the tax. Now QuickBooks, you go in and set up your own tax rate. So mine's 8.25. So on these two products on the $75, there is a $6.09 tax. Then that adds on, so it's 75 plus 225 plus 619 gives us the total of 83.44. Okay. Now, because our plugin is only telling QuickBooks that the payment occurred, if the merchant, if their customer chooses to pay with cash, they actually have to come into the invoice and remove this. Because if they're not applying that fee to the cash transactions, then they want to remove the, highlight it, and they want to remove it out of there. So that way it's not going to be added into the total of the sale. And notice that our totals mess up. So that's the only, it can be a little bit troublesome for merchants who are running transactions right through QuickBooks that want to accommodate this cash discount option. But if they know, the merchant's going to have to know when they're running the transaction whether or not the customer is paying credit card or cash. Okay. So if, let's say, they built all their invoices on Monday, and now the customer's standing in their office today saying, I want to pay cash. Well, they may have to go in and adjust these and just remove that processing fee. So it's not applied for that cash transaction. Now, as a customer, I would save and close. I'm gonna close this. Now I want to, just so we can see how it happens. Go back, where did I go? There we go. I'm gonna add the processing fees back in just so that way we have, we can see that being applied. So the merchant, like I said, they would just have to remove that if they were doing cash, check, or something other than where a convenience fee would be applied. So I'm going to save the changes. Now the plugin is designed to ask me what I want to do with that invoice. It's initially designed to work off of invoices, though it does work with sales receipts and returns. It also does statement charges and statements and that kind of billing as well. It's just a matter of whether or not it's a receive a payment or a sales receipt. So if I wanted to receive the payment immediately, I would click receive payment, which opens the normal QuickBooks customer payment window. At this stage, I would indicate how much they're paying, which is the invoice amount. I would indicate here what type of payment that they're doing. Now, this is important because we need to tell QuickBooks what type of payment that customer is doing. So that way, when it comes time to reconcile their QuickBooks, they can go and see, well, I ran this much in Amex, I ran this much in checks, I collected this much in cash. And it allows QuickBooks to know what is going on as far as their payments go. So as a customer that's wanting to pay with a Visa card, I would click on this button to indicate that I'm wanting to use a credit card. The merchant would then select which type of card the customer pays with. Now, QuickBooks has a way where you can go in and set a customer up in QuickBooks and say their preferred payment method is a MasterCard. So it would always default to this if I had selected Jane Smith, but I don't have that set up for her at the moment. So I'll select that she's going to use a MasterCard today. And then I simply click done. At this stage, I've filled in all the information, and then I save and close. Now the plugin is going to bring up our process payment window. Notice up here, it says the invoice number that's being paid, the amount, and we're on the credit tab. Now, if I had filled out all of Jane Smith's information in QuickBooks, it would have pulled it in and filled it in for me. So I didn't select the right customer to kind of show that. But if she had a company name, address, all that information would be automatically put in for me. Now, if the merchant has hardware, they would have a button that says swipe card. I think it actually might be right here. I don't have one on my computer. For some reason, my new computer won't connect to any of our hardware. It's probably a problem with my computer, not the hardware, but so they would have the option to swipe the card. They can manually key it in, of course. And then if they have processed a credit card with that customer before, then they can click on card on file and it will look to see if there's any card data for that customer. So we see here that Jane Smith we processed before, so we'll select that card. and will process now. Now, at this point, it's going to get the approval. The merchant can then print the receipt right from their computer. This would be a receipt based off of our receipt manager, not in a QuickBooks manager, like receipt manager. So it's one way they can do it if they want to print it there. Some merchants prefer to just go back in, find the payment that they just processed for Jane Smith, and either print it or email it from here. And it includes the approval code down here in the memo field. So that way we know this was processed through EPN, here's the approval code, everything was good, and it was settled out. If we look back at the invoice for Jane, let's find her.
And does it show as paid immediately or does it
Yes.
update later on? Okay.
Well, once the payment is approved through that way that we were doing it, it will, what happens is when you create the payment in QuickBooks, when you hit receive payments, let me so let's look at this payment here. Sorry. So let's look at this one. So it's a past due payment that needs to be paid out, right? So when I click on receive payment, I'm gonna do this. You'll notice that the reminder's coming up. And then, sorry, I'm mixing up my windows here. So at this stage, QuickBooks is waiting for us to pay this invoice, right? So this is the invoice in QuickBooks, and this is the payment window in QuickBooks. So I can go in, select her payment method. She's a Visa today, so we're going to do that. We'll save and close. Notice how the invoice was immediately marked paid, right? Now, technically, right now, it's in limbo because it's waiting for this payment here, the process payment window, to complete its task and tell QuickBooks whether or not that payment was paid or not. Now, let's assume that for whatever reason, I cancel the payment. She said, my card, I left it at home. Let me come back, whatever, right? So we cancel that and we just tell QuickBooks to delete the payment. Now that doesn't delete the invoice, it just deletes that customer payment that I was creating. So that way QuickBooks knows the payment never occurred. So when I click delete payment, it returns it back to an open invoice.
Okay.
So sometimes customers get confused because they're in the receive payment window, the process payment window from our plugin, and see that the invoice has been paid, but they haven't finished the transaction. So it holds it in limbo until you complete it. Now, like I had canceled it, I could have recorded the payment. Let's say I didn't want to record the cash through my system. She paid me cash. I could have just closed out the payment window and said, okay, we'll do it for cash. But so it does kind of hold in limbo until the plugin's done, and depends on whether it's approved or declined. If it's declined, it would just delete the payment out of QuickBooks, and then we would wait until they came back with a new card.
Okay. And if you were to click record transaction, would that have still showed as paid?
Yes, because then you told QuickBooks, we're not going to listen to the plugin. I just want to record this payment.
Got you. Okay.
So it depends on the nature of what the merchant is doing at that time. So maybe they forgot to select cash, for instance, and they just canceled the window, told it to delete to record the payment, and then they went and modified it. So there's a number of ways that they could, modify and manipulate what's going on in QuickBooks.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the primary function of the plugin, is just to receive a payment through QuickBooks. So as you see, we receive payment, we go into QuickBooks just like any other merchant would. Even if they were using Intuit Merchant Services, they'd still start in this window. If they're using Intuit Merchant Services, they would have to uncheck this until they disconnect. But that's just one of those things where when you're connected to Intuit, they kind of hijack everything. So a lot of merchants who are switching over that haven't disconnected Intuit will have to uncheck this box until they disconnect it, so it'll use our system instead of Intuit.
Okay. They have to uncheck it for each payment, or does it
Correct.
say?
Correct. Until they disconnect the Intuit. Once
Right.
that's disconnected, this becomes unchecked.
Gotcha.
So when a lot of merchants like to kind of do a little overlap, to make sure that the plugin's doing what it needs to do and they're doing into it before that. So
Yes.
so only in those situations would they have to do that. But once they've disconnected into it, it unchecks that box and it becomes just a basic payment.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the other option that the plugin has, so not only does it do payments, sales receipts is a kind of like a point of sale transaction in QuickBooks. So it's all in one. It's instead of having an invoice and a separate payment to counter that invoice, a sales receipt is just that. It's basically a point of sale transaction. So you would select the customer, you would indicate what products they were purchasing, just like you would for everything else, you know, like any other kind of thing. You indicate what they're going to process with. Click done and save and close. Now the plugin will open immediately because there is no counter payment. A sales receipt's all in one. It's the
Okay.
itemization and the payment. So at this stage, I would click on here or swipe her card or manually key it. I'm sure I've done something with her in the last 12 months. Let's see. There we go. And they can do a search up to 12 months for a credit card. So if it's once in a while, they can always look that far back. They can also search by company name, that kind of thing. So they do have that kind of, you know, control over finding that card data that was previously used. So I would
Okay.
hit that and then I click save and close.
And I'm
It's a
assuming to use this feature where you find the saved info, you would have to have an option enabled on EPN. I think.
No, the card on file feature is built into the plugin and it's based off of looking
Oh, okay.
at past transactions. So it does not work with our customer database manager.
Okay.
That's a different independent database that is used through like our JPAWS, our online terminal, those kinds of products that are outside of QuickBooks. It's kind of like an internal customer database. So the plugin
Got you.
just looks
Okay.
at the activity reports for past use transactions.
That's great.
And so, so this sales receipt has been paid and is full. So if we were to come back in here and look at that sales receipt, we'll see that it doesn't actually get a payment screen, but we do see that it's marked paid here, paid credit in the approval code.
Okay.
So in QuickBooks, these don't actually get paid, like a mark of paid. What it is if it wasn't paid in full, it would actually be marked as pending. So it's like I was saying earlier, it's like an invoice and a payment all in one, as
Right.
opposed to separate entries into QuickBooks.
Okay.
So we'll close that. Now, of course, I can always do a refund as well. So if this customer returned, you know, some of these items from me back to me like these, then I can come in here, create a credit memo, save and close, and I want to give a refund. And again, this is all the normal QuickBooks programming at this stage. So I say give a refund because I want to return money back to them. Some merchants like to apply it to a different invoice, or they may just retain it in QuickBooks as an available credit to be applied to a future invoice. So depending on the nature of why this customer is returning this product and how they want to get their money back, the merchant can decide how QuickBooks will allocate that information and reconcile it. But we want to actually run an actual credit card refund. So we'll click on this. And I have to actually, oops, darn it. Where did it go? I need to change my dollar amount. Because it's a demo account, anything that ends in a penny will actually be declined. So let me move that out of the way. Where is it? Restore. That's not it. Here, I'll just go back here and start over. So, and it's always in the way. There we go. So I would create the, you know, select the person, select the items in QuickBooks. So QuickBooks knows what was being returned back to my office. And then I save and close and then give a refund. So click OK. Now this is the issue a refund window that QuickBooks would automatically pop up. Defaults to check because most businesses just issue checks. They don't normally do that. But we're going to go ahead and say we know it's a Visa card for this person. So we're going to say OK. And then the ePN plugin comes up with our process credit refund. Now, at this point, I could either manually key in the credit card or I can use the card on file feature. So I'll choose the payment we had originally for her and we'll click process payment. and then it's successful. So at this point, I could print the receipt for the credit memo, but like I was saying earlier, a lot of merchants like to go in and just go back into their receipts. And here's that refund that I just did. It says that it's been marked refunded.
Mhm.
Returns don't get an approval code, but we can see that it was refunded by credit card right down here. And so at that point, the merchant can then print it or email them. And that would include all of the information related to it. Whereas our receipt still indicates some information. It would just indicate the credit memo number, but this kind of gives more detail. So a lot of merchants just do it through QuickBooks once the payment or the return is done.
Right.
Okay, so those are the three things that the plugin can do right in QuickBooks. The merchant doesn't have to go to the online terminal. They don't have to go to our website. They don't have to use any other products. All they have to do is stay in QuickBooks, run the transactions. Everything's live and it's recorded immediately in QuickBooks. So they don't have to do anything.
Okay. Now, I'm not really an expert on QuickBooks, frankly, because I personally have never went into a QuickBooks account.
Mhm.
But let me ask you, I assume the QuickBooks desktop version also allows send in electronic invoices, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. How would
Now,
that work in this case with
we
EPN?
We prefer, the problem with QuickBooks Desktop is that it does not allow you to build a dynamic email. So you can customize it with all the text you want, but you can't like add a URL, which is
Mhm.
what we do with this Sync Online, right?
Right.
ePNPlugIn Online, we provide a URL. So QuickBooks Desktop doesn't allow to do that. Now you could do it if depending on how you have it connected to your email server. Excuse me. Um, Depending
That's
on
right.
that, sometimes your email server might have a default email situation like Outlook or something like that, where when you pull it up, it automatically fills information for you. So again, that would be how the merchant has it set up. Um, but as a default in QuickBooks, we can't put that URL in. So what we use is what's called the EPN Bill Pay. And what this does is the manager allows you to two different ways to upload invoices to the bill pay system. So what we're doing in this scenario is we're taking an invoice that was created in QuickBooks, we're uploading it to our server under the bill pay service. That bill pay service then mimics the invoice, copies it just the way QuickBooks told us, and emails it to the customer. The customer pays it online. Then when the payment settles, then it's downloaded into QuickBooks. Scratch my forehead, sorry. So
Okay.
for instance, like if we were to choose this one for Judy Quest for $50, $54, I would select it and I would click upload to select it. Notice that it's no longer here. So I'll close this. Please excuse my kitty. Uh, she can be a little loud sometimes. Let me switch accounts real quick so I can show you where it's set up. Come on. So once I've uploaded that invoice to the bill pay system, the merchant can review the invoices here. They cannot modify them. Any modifications to an invoice needs to be done in QuickBooks, but it is reflected in the bill pay. So what'll happen is the customer will receive an invoice for Judy Quest right here for $54. So we'll look at that invoice. So this is the same invoice that was in QuickBooks. It does have a little bit different layout, but it's mimicking the same information. The due date, the date it was created, the due date of the invoice, whether it was sent or not. I must have been testing something where it didn't send things. So, and then it tells you whether it was from the ePN plugin or not. Now, if I must have been testing something where I turned it off to automatically send it to do something else, but there is a setting in the plugin where you tell it if it's uploaded, it immediately emails it to the customer. Some merchants like that, some merchants don't. So we give them the option to come into the bill pay system and either email a whole bunch of invoices at one time or do them individually, however they want to manage it.
Okay.
But
Is it
normally
possible to change that external where it says from EPM plugin? Is it possible to kind of remove that so the customer doesn't see it?
the customer would not see this. This is only seen by the merchant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this particular one is only seen by the merchant. So that way, when the merchant comes into the bill pay system, they can see where the invoice was generated, because if it was from, like if I were to come in here and just click new invoice, that would not be a QuickBooks invoice. It would be an invoice specifically built in our bill pay system. So it would not be reflected in
Right.
QuickBooks.
Okay.
So that's just to let the merchant know where did this invoice come from so they don't get confused. Now, here's what the invoice would look like to the customer. So here, they can customize it by putting their own logo at the top, noticing that the billing information for the customer is here, the invoice number, the invoice of it's being paid, or, that it's open, the invoice date, how much the products were, and what they were itemized. And if there was any other additional information, it would have been fed into here. And then they would just simply pay the invoice. So I'm gonna do that real quick. Yeah, good. Does require.
And if the invoice from QuickBooks had the convenience fee added, then I'm assuming it would show up on the bill pay invoice as well, right?
Correct. It would actually show as a line item here. It
Okay.
would show the convenience fee. It would say subtotal and then like processing fees or convenience fees. So it would show that in the itemization.
Okay.
So then I would just come down here. I would select my payment option, and then I would go and submit the transaction. Okay, so now been approved. So I'm going to move this down so I can come back over here. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this batch so we can see those transactions download. So you can see how it immediately assigns to that payment. I mean, that invoice rather, sorry. Come on, get out of the way. Let's make sure I finished. Good, okay. So now that the batch is closed, we can go back over here. Now the plugins download manager, this downloads any transaction, whether it be bill pay, online terminal, mobile, JPAWS, website transactions, any of those transactions can be downloaded into QuickBooks. So there are different settings. One is automatic for the download manager, and that allows, what that does is it tells QuickBooks or the plugin to download the transactions when QuickBooks opens. So like since our batches close in the late evening, some businesses are already closed by that time. So then the following morning, they'd have it set to automatic. They'd log into their QuickBooks and QuickBooks would run the download and tell them that there are transactions to be downloaded. Manual option is you don't want it to do that first thing in the morning. You're going to go in and tell it to do it when you're ready to do it, but you always have the manual option anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and click Download Manager. And right now it's going through the processes of doing what it needs to do, right? So we're going to click Close here. And here's the payment for $46 or $54. It assigned it to Judy's payment. And now it's ready to record. So two things occur when it downloads a transaction. If an invoice number is provided at the time of the transaction, whether it be through the bill pay system, JPAWS, mobile, online terminal, or even a web integration, it knows exactly where to apply it. So even if someone else pays for it, like Travis paid for Judy's, it would still apply to her payment, to her invoice. Okay, so at this point, as a merchant, I would just select it and click Record Payments. And at that stage, the invoice will be marked paid. So let's go look at her. Judy Quest. Oops, I'm going to double click. So here's the payment for $54. So if we look at that, we see it has an authorization code down here indicating that it had been paid. The payment was for this invoice and for the dollar amount. So everything reconciles. So when it's downloaded in the download manager, window, once you record it, then it's recorded in QuickBooks and everything reconciles. So that's pretty self-explanatory, pretty forward. So the bill pay, using the bill pay, everything's kind of like one circle. We upload it to the bill pay, the customer pays it, it settles, it's downloaded, and all the merchant has to do is select all and click Record Payments. Now, in the event that there is other transactions, this one needs to be deleted actually. Now, if you run a transaction for a customer without an invoice number, now it has a logic that if the customer exists in QuickBooks and they have an open invoice that matches the dollar amount of the payment. So let's say I did a payment through the online terminal and for $25, or let's say $26 for this payment here, for this invoice here, right? So let's try that. I'll show you what happens there. So let's go to the online terminal. It's not that window. I want this one. So I would come in here, I'd put in $26 because that's how much she's paying. I'm just going to show you how to do it from a different perspective. I'm not going to put the invoice number because I want to show you how this all kind of connects without an invoice number. So we have a payment for $26, Judy Quest. We're going to go ahead and put in our card data. Just use this. And submit the check. No, I don't want level 3. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and close the batch. So any other transactions that are processed will be downloaded. The only time that a merchant would have to intervene with them is if the customer didn't exist in QuickBooks, if the payment had a name that was misspelled, if there was no, if the customer is a new customer, something like that, then they can interact with those payments that are being downloaded. Okay, so that's been downloaded. I do apologize for my kitty. She's 17 and very grumpy these days.
No worries.
So let's look at the download manager again. So we'll just give it a moment. And so now it comes up, close. Now under, let's close this real quick, actually. Try opening it up again.
You were right though when you said this is more complicated than the online.
Yes, it is. So when you do it
Definitely.
this way, then we can apply that payment to the invoice appropriately, and then it moves to the online, it moves to ready to record. And now I can just select it and record it. Now, under the action required, again, this would be where there's some discrepancy between the payment and in QuickBooks. So no invoice, the customer name's misspelled, or someone else is paying for them. So it couldn't find the customer based off of the payment information. The merchant can create new customers on the fly. They can create invoices from this window to accommodate a payment, or they can even record it as a quick sale, which simply just creates one of those sales receipts that I had shown you earlier. It does not, the one thing that it does not do is itemize products purchased. So if the merchant is using, let's say, our inventory system and wants that payment through the JPOS that's been itemized and all of that to be downloaded in QuickBooks, an invoice is necessary for that purpose. Because we can't tell QuickBooks or modify QuickBooks' inventory. But quick sales receipts is in my opinion, a form of lazy accounting. It just basically tells QuickBooks I collected this money. It doesn't tell it what was purchased or what was sold. It just says, I collected $25 from the JPOS application, and here's the amount that I collected. So they have a few different options here. They can also do returns and record returns in QuickBooks, though at the time, let's say they use the online terminal to do the return, in the invoice field, they would put the credit memo number that already exists in QuickBooks so that it knows where to apply it. Or they can actually create it at the time that it's been downloaded.
Okay, so
So
I
those,
just want to recap something to make sure I understand it correctly, because I know that this is the method that most of our customers like to use. For an invoice or an electronic invoice, the steps you followed were you created the invoice on QuickBooks, you open the plugin here, you clicked, I think, download manager, or what was it that you clicked to get the
Well,
invoices?
if you're just, are you talking about the bill pay manager, right?
Yes. Okay, bill pay manager, yes. And then you got invoices, you clicked get invoices to get them from QuickBooks, right?
Right, and it looks for unpaid invoices, or you can look for other invoices too, but
Okay.
unpaid is really what you want to start with.
Okay,
Is where
and then
that'll
you
get them.
select it, you upload, you go to your EPN account online, and then you go to bill pay and you select that invoice and send it to your customer. And you
You
told me
can,
that it,
I was gonna show you,
okay,
let me get you one thing here quick. Come on, QuickBooks. And the plugin opens and closes with QuickBooks. So as long, when you close QuickBooks out, it'll close out. When you reopen your company file, it'll reopen. So,
okay,
and in the configuration of the plugin, this is the plugin's configuration window. So we tell it which account to apply with, we give it a terminal name and ID, and then there's a bill pay licensing here. So what I do is you allocate it and then you just click automatically send invoice if it's uploaded. I think the reason why my invoice didn't send is because I didn't have an accurate email. But if since most customers will have a valid email, it'll be sent through the bill pay system. But they would check that box off when they're configuring the plugin to use the bill pay system. And then that would
mhm,
automatically email them the invoice once it's been uploaded.
okay, okay. And the batch out or the yeah, the batch close, that's automatic as well. That's not something that the merchant has to manually go in and do every time unless they want to, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We can set
I
it to
have a
any time that they want it to be auto closed though.
great. I have a question, Katra. Now, I sort of understand, I'm pretty sure I understand mainly how the plugin works, but I'm curious, when we open a new merchant account, how does one actually download the plugin and enter the necessary information to have it synced to their QuickBooks accounts?
Well, now for the desktop, sorry, right here we go. So they would just log into their account, go to software and apps and download the plugin. I have all these old ones, don't worry about those, but they would do version 4 because that's the one that we are currently selling. They would just
Okay,
click download. They would want to turn QuickBooks off while they're doing this installation because the plugin
okay,
is trying to interact with the QuickBooks file and so forth. So they want to close out of QuickBooks completely. It's always
okay,
it's best that an admin be the one to do the installation, an admin over QuickBooks, also an admin over the actual computer, because if the employee does not have admin rights over their computer, that may prevent them from doing the installation. When we're doing the connection with QuickBooks, it will ask you at one point to log into the QuickBooks file. And usually it's best to do it through the admin. So that way QuickBooks prompts a couple of different windows to make that connection complete. Once that's done, anyone who uses that computer under any user in QuickBooks, the plugin will open and work with them. They don't have to be an admin.
okay. Would you be able to show us what it looks like when you first download the plugin and how you would connect it to QuickBooks? Or would that not work since you already have it connected?
Well, I'd have to uninstall it because it won't let me
Oh, I
reinstall.
see.
So, I mean,
But
you
is that
clicking
like an
download it just puts it in your downloads.
right? Once you open it when you first downloaded it, what are the next steps you follow? You have to then open your
It's
QuickBooks and then it would sync
the
automatically, or
No, the steps are you close QuickBooks and then you download the
mhm,
program. When
right?
it's the download's complete, you click run. It
Hmm.
runs. The first window comes up, it starts doing the little bar, the little bar that comes across. The next step would have been the configuration window, which I just showed you
Right,
here.
yes.
That
Yes.
pops up asking for their account number and the various other things that they can enter. They would do first, you have to configure it to your account before you can go and connect it to the bill pay. So it is when involving the bill pay, there's 2 steps. If the bill pay is not involved, then they just put in their information, save changes. When they save changes at that stage, the plugin then communicates with QuickBooks, and what we call, excuse me, it's basically connecting to different variations of commands in QuickBooks, like creating a payment, creating a customer, those kinds of things. So it goes through that process and it does that syncing process. Actually, I could show you.
Okay, and if bill pay is in the equation, is there any extra step they have to take?
No, once that happens, then the plugin comes up and says, please wait a second, we're opening QuickBooks. And it'll tell them not to log in because all it's doing is finalizing that last step that doesn't involve a login. Once that
Okay.
happens, they'll get a button that says complete integration. They close that. That'll close QuickBooks too. Then they reopen QuickBooks, log in, and at that stage, QuickBooks is going to say, hey, I have a new program that wants to work with your company file. What do you want me to do? There's a window where it says, you know, it says no certificate, but it just means this is the new program. It'll say the plugin, and then they select use always, even when QuickBooks is not running. And this is really just so that we always maintain a high level of connection with QuickBooks. We don't want to give it too many restrictions because that could prevent the plugin from doing its function.
Okay.
Sometimes if they have multiple users in QuickBooks, there'll be a drop-down menu where they'll go and select the admin. If they're the only user of QuickBooks, they're the admin, so it won't ask for that. So they'll select yes, always, connect to QuickBooks, and then they'll select the admin if it's prompted. They'll continue, then two more windows come up, they say yes and done, and then it's all connected and they can start working. It's a really simple installation. It doesn't take very long. Of course, we have videos and documentation that can walk them through that, or they can call in and get some assistance.
Oh, that's great. If you could please, Katra, after our meeting, if you could provide me with those videos and documentation, just so we can keep it as well in case we want to send it to someone.
Sure. Well,
Usually even
you can
after.
always, all the videos are found on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
I know
Yeah,
that
I was looking at one for bill pay and the plugin, but I got a little bit confused.
yeah. Let's see, do I have YouTube?
And I have a question. I assume the answer is yes, but I just want to make sure. On an internet basic account, in order to use bill pay, you don't have to have JPAWS enabled, right? Bill pay doesn't work. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Bill Pay is its own independent program. Like anything that we have that starts with ePN is its own independent program, can be run by itself. A lot of our programs do interact with one another. So like inventory works with online terminal, bill pay, JPAWS and mobile, but it's still its own independent program. It just integrates with the other programs, even online terminal or web integrations.
Gotcha.
So like bill pay is its own program. It's not synonymous with the plugin. It's just the plugin can connect to it and allow us to utilize the bill pay to allow that emailing of invoices. JPAWS is a point of sale software, so it's really ideal for, face-to-face storefront type of point of sale environments. Though it has a place to put a QuickBooks invoice number in, so that way it links it back to QuickBooks. So everything's kind of interconnected. It's just a matter of what does the merchant need to accomplish and how can we connect them all together. But the plugin in itself is designed to be really utilized right into QuickBooks. So you don't have to go outside QuickBooks into our website or anything.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty clear now how we can utilize the plugin. I'm sure we might have questions in the future, in which case I'll definitely have to ask you. It's okay. I do have a question. It's not really about the plugin, but I got the idea when you were showing us how to refund payments, and I realized that I don't know how to refund payments on a QuickBooks Online sync using the payment form generator.
Got it.
How would one do that in that case?
In those situations, the merchant, because we cannot actually put in like a plugin into QuickBooks Online so that whenever they create a payment or a return, something opens up and asks for the card information, the merchant would actually have to issue any returns through the online terminal. Now, they would come into the online terminal, put in how much the return is, click return here, fill in the information, and then submit the transaction. Now in QuickBooks, they would have gone in and created like a credit memo in QuickBooks desktop. Let me pull mine up real quick. So they would create the credit memo here, which would then actually pay out in QuickBooks. So it would reconcile in QuickBooks, and then they would issue the return, the actual credit card return here.
Okay, so they
And
have to do them separately. They create the credit memo
correct,
and show it as paid, and then
correct,
they issue the refund separately. Okay,
correct.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay, I think I have all of my questions answered in regards to the plugin. Like I said, I will most probably have more answers later or when actually dealing with the merchants and helping them get started on this. But then I will just be reaching out to you. Alex, do you have any questions in regards to the
S
plugin before we let Katra go?
yeah, so far nothing until I actually try to apply this with the merchant, and then I'm just gonna, check the videos and everything, and if there's anything, I'll ask you, Katro.
Okay.
All
Yeah,
right.
definitely. If you need any help or I also help resellers, demo it to the merchant. So that way they can, the merchant can actually see it in action. So if you ever need that, just let me know.
That's
Great.
great. Thank you so much. Again, it's always a pleasure speaking to you.
You
Um,
too.
and like we said, we'll be in touch if there's anything in the future.
Okay. And just to let you
Okay.
know about your merchant,
Oh, the anchor
yes,
tree one, yeah.
the tree one. He said he would be back Tuesday. And at that
Mm-hmm.
point, I will go ahead and try resyncing everything to make sure that the other programs that he had connected aren't interfering somehow. But that's as far as I can get until he comes back. So
Okay. Did you get any answer from you told me you were going to speak to your programmers to see what the issue would be resulting from?
yeah, he said that there was no indication. I could look at the logs too of his account, and I saw that QuickBooks accepted the payment. The day that I spoke to him, which was Tuesday, I think, for some reason the payment didn't get recorded in QuickBooks, even though QuickBooks had accepted it. So I'm not sure if
Okay.
it was a delay in his QuickBooks recording it, or if there was some kind of breakdown. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of getting the logs from his QuickBooks to look at, see what happened on their end. But on our end, everything seemed to be connected. Now, previous transactions that he had tried did sync with the payments or did sync into QuickBooks. So I'm not sure if it was just because we removed those extra applications and we needed QuickBooks to kind of, reconcile those changes before it allowed our plugin to, our Sync Online to communicate with it. So that may have been it. It may have been killed by QuickBooks, even though QuickBooks said that it accepted it. So, and he was in a rush at that moment, so I couldn't go into too much detail with him. But
Okay.
hopefully when Tuesday comes, I can reset everything and we can try again and see how things go. And then that'll give me a new idea of what to do next. And I did ask my programmer, I said, is there anything I can try to get from QuickBooks? He said, unfortunately, not really. Because QuickBooks doesn't just, the back end stuff that's happening between the servers isn't something that would be accessible through QuickBooks Online. So I'm not
Right.
sure who we would contact about that at QuickBooks to get that information. So I know my programmer was trying to figure out a way for us to maybe do a call function from QuickBooks to see, hey, can we get any information about what we're doing with you? So he's going to look into doing that, and hopefully he'll have me an answer by Tuesday.
That's great. Okay. And I'm assuming even worst case scenario, maybe you can have the merchants or together with the merchant contact their QuickBooks support to see why this could be happening on their accounts,
Right. Yeah,
perhaps.
we can try that and see what we can come up with. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Well,
I have
fingers
a
crossed then.
feeling that if we reset everything, then it'll start working just fine. There were some issues with that I did discover where it wasn't assigning appropriately if a name was misspelled or different. So that is something that my programmer is currently working on and should have a fix by Tuesday, I'm hoping. But that wasn't the issue that he was experiencing necessarily. But it
Right.
is something that could have been a problem before this new update comes out. So hopefully by Tuesday, we'll reset everything, see how it goes, and hopefully we'll resolved it.
Okay, yep. Like you said, I'll be waiting for your updates and fingers crossed, hopefully we'll have it resolved by then.
Yes, definitely. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, again, it was a pleasure, Ketra. Thank you very
Thanks.
much for your help with this.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Ketra.
You have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.